Welcome back to Impact Nostalgia. My name is Daniel Quasar, and on today's episode, we're taking a trip back over 20 years to the mid-90s for one of my favorite cult classic point-and-click adventure games on the PC. Without further ado, here's Impact Nostalgia with The Neverhood. When I was a kid in the 90s, I feel like I already have a catchphrase. School was often boring, and I certainly would have rather been somewhere else. Sound familiar? Probably because most of the preteens of that decade felt the same. To combat my lack of interest in school, my parents resorted to monetary incentive. But instead of just handing me cash, it was presented with a different value system of achievement. For every good grade I received, I'd receive cash value credit towards buying a computer game. For an A, I got $4, and a B grade meant $2. I didn't receive anything for C or lower. Over the course of my middle school years, I managed to buy at least 3 games through this system, one of which is covered in this episode. If you calculate it all up, with games costing around $50 then, and the amount of times you received grades during the school year, I had to have a pretty consistent GPA. I wasn't always perfect, but it was good enough to net me some pretty awesome games. Let's take a look at one of the games I bought. In 1996, a group of animation and gaming buddies in the industry got together and created The Neverhood. The Neverhood was a PC point-and-click adventure game published by Dreamworks Interactive. What made this game so special wasn't just the storytelling and campy humor, it was the fact that the graphics were made entirely out of clay. Every character, every UI component, and all the parts that went into making the set were all handmade from different colored clay. This game was literally like looking through a window into a clay set. The first-person sections of the game were filmed as live movement with a camera, and the side-scrolling sections were pre-rendered. I still remember walking into one of the old brick-and-mortar Egghead computer stores and playing the demo of The Neverhood. A woman was standing behind me watching as I played. I was trying to get out of the first building, which was a setup of puzzles and humorous traps. There was a big red button on the main door, and of course, I went right up and pressed it. The character was immediately punched by a comically large punching glove that came out of the door and fell back. The woman and I both burst with laughter that surprised a lot of patrons and workers in the store. There were a lot of different parts of this game that I enjoyed, but the most important one is probably one of the most obscure. In the game, there is a building called the Hall of Records. Inside is where you are introduced to the cassette memory system. This was the game's main collection plot device, in that you had to collect these little cassettes that would help you progress to the final section of the game. Otherwise, you were stuck. As you pop these cassettes into the clay computers, they'd play parts of a video story. If you had them all, you saw the whole video and were given a key. But if you were missing any, the story had holes. But that's not what I'm trying to focus on. There was another section to this hall. In the back section of the hall was a room that had writing on the walls. As you walked left to right, there would be more walls with more writing, continuing on endlessly. Being the side-scrolling game that this was, meant that you'd spend at least 10 to 15 minutes just walking from side to side of a ton of screens to reach the end. At the end of the hall is a window and one of the cassettes. But it was the writing on the wall that was intriguing. This could have been an opportunity for the developers to be lazy and just have something pointless written, but instead, they had an elaborate origin story for this world and even its universe. It was very reminiscent of Greek Roman mythology and had elements of Judeo-Christian creation myths. It told the tales of different gods who existed, or might still be existing, and their parts they played in different aspects of creation, chaos, destruction, and rebirth. One section of these stories dealt with the main god of this game, and was the most influenced by Christian theology and the choices he made in its creation. I definitely spent an hour or two scrolling and reading this entire story. There's a link in the description to a website that transcribed the whole story if you want to read it too. This game was all about choices. I mean, yes, it was about puzzles and progression, but it was also about choosing your destiny and the consequences of those choices. That sounds serious, but the game introduces the concept of choice very early on in quirky adolescent ways that I won't spoil. The end of the game is a choice itself. You, the player, while standing in the throne room of your god, must decide if you want to save them or make the world your own, all played out in a full motion video with paused sections to make your choices. I won't tell you the choice I made in the end, but what I will say is this game made me want to create a world of my own. And I did, in the form of fiction writing and creating my own creation myth. If you're interested in reading that, let me know, and maybe I will put it up somewhere. Anytime I come across the Neverhood, I am always filled with warm feelings and memories. I get a flood of imagery involving the game, the characters, the cutscenes, and all sorts of little details that this game is full of. Even the soundtrack, which you can hear in the background of this video, was fun and interesting. Full of quirky, folk-inspired tunes that somehow just work in this world. I guess it could be that a quirky art style just fits well with quirky genres of music. I recently found out that I wasn't the only person in my town to play this game. While talking about it, one of my friends mentioned how much they loved the game too when they were younger, and how they were gifted the soundtrack. It was nice to hear there was someone else already in my circle of friends who had admiration too. I feel like this game really fostered my desire for creation when I was younger. While digging through family memories to find content for this video, I ran across an old comic strip I had forgotten about. I wasn't a very good artist then, but it was fun to find some fan art. When I wasn't playing this game, I was busy surfing the web, seeking out anything I could find about it. I'm a collector at heart, and so whenever I found good resources, I would immediately right-click and save. Pictures, sound bites, backgrounds, text information, and animations were all collected into my tiny 2GB hard drive. My brother was attending community college around this time and was taking a web development class. Back then, it was as simple as being taught HTML and the fundamentals of hand-coding a website. Every night, he'd come home from class and hand me his textbooks. I spent hours reading through them and learning. Eventually, I was caught up to his class's skill level in website creation and was off making my own. I'd take pieces from all the different components I had collected and build little web shrines. They weren't anything complex or extravagant, but merely simple one-page websites that usually consisted of art from the game and some text describing an aspect here or there, almost always titled with the name of the game. There was something special in knowing that someone out there might run across my little website and want to play the same game I had played. We had no way to communicate with each other directly, but we both could enjoy the website from each side of our little glass mirrors. In a way, this series is the same. I am creating little videos about the games that I love in hopes that someone out there might run across them and fall in love with these games too. Did you do something similar? Were there games in the 90s or whenever that made you want to go out and build little pages on the internet like I did? Let me know in the comments, because I would love to hear about them. Thanks so much for watching, and let's never forget the games that are important to us and the memories attached to them.